It's that time. Welcome to day 20 of reading every single day for the rest of my life. I'm excited. Today we got Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday to celebrate. Day 20, we got some Cheez-Its. Every page flip, I'm going to try to remember to eat one. If I'm too in the book, then I'm too in the book. So yeah, man. Let's do it. We start 30 minutes. Starting, yeah. Ruling over yourself. You could say it was in her from the beginning. Churchill certainly saw it. Upon meeting the baby who would become the great Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest-serving monarch and likely the longest-serving in all of history, he noted, "She has an air of authority and reflectiveness that's astonishing in an infant. But of course, the throne then lay some 2.5 decades in the future, on the other side of the World War and an abdication crisis. What Churchill sensed that day were the beginnings of the temperament that created an incredible life of self-control, service, and perseverance. A mental and emotional discipline that has rarely been seen, before or since, in the halls of grand palaces, especially in 25-year-olds who have suddenly become empresses or emperors. We want to think of leaders as bold and brash, charismatic and inspiring. We expect them to be ambitious. We even excuse tragic flaws or disturbing vices, as long as they're winning or entertaining us. This no doubt makes them compelling, but is it the right recipe for a stable, sustainable stewardship? If a nation, a business, or sports franchise, more important, is that the only way? Plato had a different ideal in mind, asking for a monarch who was young and possessed by nature of a good memory, quick intelligence, courage, and nobility of manner, and let that quality, temperance, as the necessary accompaniment of all the parts of virtue, attend now also on our monarch's soul, if the rest of his qualities are to be of any value. Born in 1926, Elizabeth had royal blood, but no clear path or even expectation to power. Certainly, few pegged her to fulfill that ancient philosopher's ideal. She was the daughter of the second son of King George V. It was only after the rash decision of her uncle Edward the Eighth to walk away from the crown to marry a twice-divorced Nazi sympathizer, and then the early death of her father, that Elizabeth's destiny was set. Whatever Churchill had seen in her child, whatever Plato hoped for, she would have to cultivate, willing herself into the Queen Elizabeth, one of the most admired and enduring figures on the planet. From the day of her coronation, Elizabeth would reign but not rule, as the expression goes, holding with perfect grace a unique and terrible job. What does the modern British sovereign do? It's hard to say. It's easier to list all the things they can't do. She can't pass laws. She can't choose who leads the government. She can't start wars. She's not even supposed to speak about matters of policy. And yet the irony of this powerlessness is all the power required to wield it. The Queen has been dully informed of every action and problem inside the United Kingdom for 69 years, in the form of daily dispatches and weekly conferences with the Prime Minister. At the same time, she is not allowed to overtly act on any of this information. She cannot in any way whatsoever involve herself in the matters of state, all of which is done literally in her name. This is precisely what Elizabeth has managed to do with near superhuman dignity through 12 prime ministers, 14 U.S. presidents, and 7 popes. On her 21st birthday in 1947, the future queen would detail her commitment to this idea in a now famous radio address, telling people of what was called in the British Empire that, "I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong." A few years later, she would express her sense of duty and place more explicitly, "I cannot lead you into battle. I do not give you laws or administer justice. but I can do something else. I can give you my heart and devotion to these old islands and to all the people of our brotherhood of nations. Could she have any idea of how long this service would last? What it would take out of her? What would it demand of her? How much heart and smarts would be required? Louis Gehrig is a hero for his streak of 2,130 games played for the Yankees. Queen Elizabeth has worked every day for nearly 7 decades. For her, every day has been a game day, some 25,000 in a row. She's visited more than 126 nations. In 1953, on a single royal tour, she traveled 40,000 miles, many of which were by boat. She shook 13,000 hands and received tens of thousands of bows and courtesies. She gave and listened to over 400 speeches, and this was just one of the more than 100 of these royal tours during her reign. In all, she traveled more than 1 million nautical miles by sea, and many times that by air. Damn. She's met more than 4 million people, personally had more than 2 million over for tea, and given more than 100,000 awards. Perhaps most impressive, out of hundreds of thousands of engagements, events, appearances, and meals, which were often preceded by long travel and the time zone changes, she has fallen asleep in public only a single time. What? At a lecture about the use of magnets in biology and medicine in 2004. It goes without saying that the Queen's regular duties take immense physical discipline. "Are you tired, General?" she once asked a noticeably drooping officer accompanying her in the office visit. "No, ma'am," he replied. "Then take your hands out of your pockets and stand up straight," she told him from her 5'4" perch. Aides have noted that the Queen is as strong as a yak and can endure long periods of standing even into old age. Harold Macmillan, her third prime minister, once exclaimed that the Queen had the heart of the stomach of a man, which is preposterous because not even Louis Gehrig could have put up with her travel schedule. But this marveling belies what is beneath those physical feats, the mental and emotional discipline that she quietly draws upon on. For instance, it's been said that the Queen literally has never been seen to sweat. This only makes her marathon appearances more impressive. Her body doesn't cool itself off well, but her poise and equanimity keep this fact from us. How does she do it? On a visit to the United States during the first Bush administration, an American official would accidentally chance upon the Queen in a moment of quiet preparation for what was to be a very long day. She was standing stock still. He noticed. It was as if she was looking inward, getting set. This was how she wound up in her batteries. There was no chit-chat, but standing absolutely still and waiting, resting herself. She has also, through the years, innovated in ways that make the long obligations more palatable. Because why white-knuckle things if you don't have to? She spends on average of 4 seconds meeting each person. She removed needless courses from dinners. She makes sure that speeches come after the meal instead of before, so that she can wrap up and sneak out to palace media officials. She's known as One-Take Windsor because while she never rushes, she thinks through what she wants to do, and then she gets it right the first time. As they say, work smarter, not harder. Discipline isn't just endurance and strength, it's also finding the best, most economical way of doing something. It's the commitment to evolving and improving so that the task gets more efficient as you go. A true master isn't just dominating their profession, they're also doing it with ease. While everyone else is still huffing and puffing after one tricky social encounter, the Queen was commended for being very professional. "I should be," she said, "not impressed by the compliment, given how long I've been doing it. Don't worry about the Queen," an aide once reassured a diplomat about a long event. "She trained for 8 hours. Actually, she's tough enough professionally to endure it for 80 years. The Briton with the stiff upper lip, the one who can so potentially keep calm and carry on, has become something of a cliche with the passage of time. And while it's always tricky to apply a stereotype to a diverse population, there's no question that the Queen has personified this ideal, keeping an even keel no matter the circumstances. In 1964, she serenely and calmly endured a violent anti-monarchy riot in Quebec. In 1981, she was riding on horseback when a gunman rushed her and fired 6 shots, eliciting barely a flinch from the Queen in response. In 1966, a heavy block of cement slammed into the roof of the royal car. "It's a strong car," she said as she shrugged it off. In 1982, a deranged intruder entered the Queen's bedroom, bleeding from breaking a window, woken from a dead sleep. She could have screamed. She could have run. Instead, she politely entertained the man until she could make an attempt to summon security. But the greatness of the Queen is more than stoic endurance. The Queen is lively, savvy woman who has managed to thrive in a position that typically brings out the worst of people who hold it. While few would refer to as intellectual, indeed many sneerily refer to as countryside women with limited intelligence. In fact, her quiet brilliance in itself is an illustration of her self-discipline. Starting at an early age, her father brought her into busyness of state, treating her as equal. From her teens, she was advised by Churchill and tutored twice per week for 6 years in law by one of England's greatest constitutional experts. The Queen, you can be sure, always knows more than she says. In almost every case, she is almost more experienced and understands the history of an issue better than the Prime Minister explaining it during their weekly audience. Yet it is they who inevitably do most of the talking, and she is the listening. Unlike her son, who not only thinks he's smarter than everyone else, but often alienates them by insisting on it, she's fine being underestimated. She's patient enough to know she will eventually be vindicated. Smart? Discipline is far rarer comedy at the top than brilliance. Temperament may be less charismatic, but it survives. It stabilizes. Still, she famously reads every dispatch in the Queen's red box, in which the most important ministerial documents are delivered to her. Many are boring, many are mind-numbingly complex. She reads 6 newspapers each morning. She does this even though no one forces her to. No one would ever quiz her on the contents. She could ask for brief summaries. She could skim, but she doesn't. Even though her opportunities to use this knowledge are constitutionally limited, she does it. Why? Because it is the surest way for her to discharge her duty. There is really only one avenue to effect change available to the Queen. In her judicious, restrained way, she uses it by asking questions. If she's concerned about something or objects to it, she requests more information above and beyond what she finds in the red box or the press, sometimes over and over again until, eventually, the potential issue becomes clear to the relevant policy makers. She doesn't blurt out what she thinks ought to be done, yet in time it becomes clear enough. Where she's brilliant is in her quietness. One press secretary would observe. In a very noisy world where people constantly want to express themselves or overreact, what the Queen has done has been the opposite. She is not empowered to have political opinions, yet she is strong enough to do something most world leaders as well as ordinary people are powerless to do: refrain from expressing opinions about things we don't control. Elizabeth is, you might say, a lifelong student of human behavior, instead of being frustrated by the limitations and obligations of her position. The Queen has found freedom in it, channeling that energy to productive ends. Aides will find some event excruciatingly boring. The Queen, on the other hand, will have found something interesting. "Didn't you realize that chap's father was the son of my father's valet?" She'll be found saying with enthusiasm after a long dinner, "Did you see that man's red socks?" She'll ask after a public event, "Why was there an extra director of music in the gallery?" She'll say after a concert, noticing something that even her security team missed, "What happened to the soldier?" She'll ask of a young man who cut his hand on a bayonet, and his commanding officer, who thought himself too important to be concerned with such things, will have no answer. A weak mind must be constantly entertained and stimulated. A strong mind can occupy itself, and more important, be still and vigilant in moments that demand it. Of all that the Queen has endured, one might think that, as a traditionalist in the most traditional of professions, she was at least unprotected from change. In fact, change has been the largest and most continental challenge in her life. For starters, most nations on Earth today did not exist when she was born. The world was quite literally remade itself during her reign. Her job has been to both preserve her institution while simultaneously adapting to a rapidly changing future. She is the last bastion of standards, it has been said, and yet almost every one of those standards have been reevaluated, adjusted, and reimagined over the years, in some cases many times. Change has become a constant, she said. Managing it has become an expanding discipline. Perhaps that is why, as part of this discipline, the royal household was adopted as a kind of motto, a quote from the author Giuseppe Tomasi de Lampedusa. If things are going to stay the same, then things are going to have to change. We have to understand self-discipline is not keeping things exactly as they are with an iron grip. It's not resistance to any and everything, nor would much discipline be required in a world that always stayed the same. Temperance is also the ability to adjust, to make good of any situation, to find the opportunity to grow and improve in any situation, and to be able to do this with equanimity and poise, even initiative and joy. Because what other choice do we have? Perhaps the most interesting and symbolic changes of Elizabeth's reign was her decision in 1933 to tax herself. If discipline is about holding herself accountable, there is perhaps no better example than the decision of a monarch to propose her own government tax her estate and income, over the objection of the Prime Minister himself. We can also stipulate that, given the colonial origins of her vast fortune, this tax and their considerable charitable giving are the least the royal family can do. But that doesn't mean everything is up in the air. Better not is a popular phrase inside the palace, as in, let's not overstep, as in, let's not rush into this, as in, let's not fix what isn't broken. Let's take all things, including change, slowly. This extends to her considerable wealth and fame. Elizabeth is not an ascetic, as in, Elizabeth is not an ascetic. She lives in a castle, after all. Fate gave her one, so why not enjoy it? Within bounds, this is perfectly possible for a disciplined person. While easier than grinding poverty, navigating abundance is its own challenge. To manage it, the Queen has had to live by a code, a sense of duty. I, like Queen Victoria, she has said, have always been a believer that old maximum moderation in all things. Younger members of her family have struggled with this kind of self-control, rebelled against it, in some disturbing cases abdicated with their basic duties as human beings. The idea that you don't get to do everything you want, that some things are non-negotiable, that the flip side of privilege is duty, and that power must be complemented by restraint, not everyone gets that, and their shameful behavior reminds us of the consequences. It's easy to be excited. It's easy to express a preference. It's easy to be a mess, too. To give yourself over to a whim, or to emotion, or to even ambition. Did I bring my drink? Yeah. Drink some water. Okay. But to keep yourself in check, to hold yourself to standards, especially when you could get away with less, it is not much better to be self-controlled and temperate in all one's actions than to be able to say what one ought to do. Lucidus Rufus would say back in ancient Rome, as an advisor to kings and elites, he understood plenty of people are masters of their universe while lacking the most important power there is. Power over their own minds, power over their own actions and choices. Still, it's a hard life. Imagine being so exacting as the Queen must be, that when a speechwriter hands you a draft of an address that begins, "I am very glad to be back in Birmingham," you take the time to cross out the word "very" because it's not quite true, nor would it be sincere or fair to all the places she has to or never will visit. An ordinary person could get away with a little rhetorical flourish, but you aren't a queen if you're ordinary. The difficulty of that balance. You are unlike anyone, but you have to be relatable to everyone. You have to be approachable at the same time as being above reproach. Head of state and head of church, modern and timeless, with everyone watching, ready for the slightest mistake. Does that mean she allows herself no emotion? that self-discipline means a robotic suppression of feeling? Absolutely not. Although the Queen holds herself to high standards, she is remarkably tolerant of breaches of protocol. The fan she reaches out and grabs her, the diplomat who forgets to bow. She is said to be surprisingly very easy to talk to, very quick to put others at ease. Because of this, too, is part of the job. It's hard to be her, but she doesn't make that hard for you. She has received her share of criticism, too, as the public people must expect to endure. Did she run from this? Complain about it? Quite the opposite. In 1992, a painful and difficult year that included the divorces of 3 of her children, a tell-all memoir published by one of the divorcees in a fire at Windsor Castle, her so-called Annus Horribilis. The Queen, still smelling of smoke from the fire, took time to specifically point out that accountability from the press was part of her job. There can be no doubt, she said, that criticism is good for people and institutions that are part of public life. No institution, city, monarchy, whatever, should expect to be free from the scrutiny of those who give their loyal and support, not to mention those who don't. Give their loyalty and support, not to mention those who don't. And yet she has also reminded the British press that there is a difference between accountability and cruelty. Scrutiny can be just as effective, she said, if it was made with a touch of gentleness, good humor, and understanding. She has tried to respond with such courtesy even when it was not extended in her direction. In 1957, when the Queen was the subject of controversial editorial that criticized her for being out of step with the times, for her stilted manner of speaking and dependence on advisers, the Queen did not take offense. In fact, she took no public notice of the criticisms at all, even when the controversy grew so great that its author, Lord Antrim, was assaulted in the streets of London. But she did privately and subtly address the legitimate feedback. Some note that even her accent has slowly shifted, becoming less pronounced and aristocratic over time, a rather impressive, if mostly uncredited feat. No one lasts very long if they're afraid of change, and few are able to change if they are afraid of feedback or making mistakes. And so here she is, at the time of this writing, 95 years old and still going. She has effectively and tirelessly served as head of state for roughly 1/6 of the Earth's surface. She has done this without personal corruption scandals, without affairs, without major missteps. If there was anyone who deserves retirement, it's her. Yet she keeps going, getting better at the most difficult job in the world as she goes. In 2013, the monarchs of Netherlands, Belgium, and Qatar would abdicate. A pope would follow suit. For the Queen, this was unthinkable. "Oh, that's something I can't do," she said. "I'm going to carry on to the end," and so she has. What about you? What is your discipline, your poise and grace under pressure? You're tired? You're in an impossible situation? Get out of here. There have been plenty of leaders with more power than Queen Elizabeth. Few, however, have had more restraint. There have been plenty of gluttons, for few as quietly glorious. It was the self-command, these abnegation, that made her a ruler her people could be proud of. It saved her from herself, from the temptations of power, sure, and it also helped to help her outlast not just many tyrants, but whole forms of tyranny itself. We have to understand, greatness is not just what one does, but also what one refuses to do. It's also how one bears the constraints of the world or their profession. It's what we're able to do with limitations, creatively, consciously, calmly. Most people have a job and then they go home. The Queen once reflected, and its existence and the job of the life go on together, because you can't really divide it up. There is no better definition of a path of temperance. It's an all-consuming and full-time thing. It's the journey of a lifetime, one that gets more impressive and rewarding the longer you stay in it. Well, look at everything like this. George Washington saw a lot go wrong. He lost his father at age 11. He was under fire for the first time before he turned 22, when an ambush on French fort along the Ohio River sparked the French in an Indian War. The Revolutionary War, though it ended with a victory, was in reality an almost ceaseless series of defeats or setbacks from Long Island to Kips Bay, White Plains to Fort Washington. Throughout the 9-Year War, he was in painful financial constraints straits and at a constant risk of hearing his beloved Mount Vernon might be burned. And then after, as the U.S. government floundered, he was drawn into the scrum of politics and ultimately the presidency, where he was subjected to criticism in the press, difficult subordinates, and the demand of voters. When Washington was 26 years old, he watched a play about the Stoics, where he had heard a phrase that he'd turned into the lifelong mantra, repeating it to himself in very stressful and challenging situation, whether it was a setback on the battlefield or the infighting between members of his cabinet. In the calm of night of mild philosophy. It was in the calm and the mild night that Washington approached the news that one of his generals was slandering him behind his back. It was in the calm and mild night that Washington dealt with the saddening realization that he and his wife could not have children. It was in the calm and mild night that Washington approached a mob-like meeting of his officers who threatened mutiny against the new American government, slowly, masterfully talking them back from treason. In June 1797, alone, Washington found himself writing this reminder out of 3 separate letters, trying to stop himself from rushing to judgment or losing control of his emotions, and instead looking at the situation with the temperament befitting the father of a country. Because like the rest of us, this was not his natural disposition. Washington was not exempt, a friend said, from the tumultuous passions which accompany greatness and frequently tarnish its luster. In fact, fighting them was the first and the most prolonged battle in the man's life. It was also the man, in his friend's eulogy, Washington's most impressive victory. So great the empire he had there acquired, that calmness of manner and of conduct distinguished him through life. The painter Gilbert Stuart spent many hours with Washington on the 1970s as he worked on a portrait of the general. What he found was fierce, determined, and an intense man. As he studied him, Stuart could feel the thunderous passions, but was struck by the way that Washington's judgment and great self-command subsumed him. That was why so few had seen his temper. Washington wasn't naturally stoic. He made himself this way. Not permanently, but anew every minute, every day, and every situation as best he could. You think Washington didn't get frustrated or overwhelmed? Of course he did. Think about what he was subjected to. Yet according to Thomas Jefferson, who often openly fought with Washington, the man never acted until every consideration was mutually weighed. He had the initial reactions we all do, but he tried to put every situation up for a kind of review, searching for a better light to explain and understand it. We know that between every stimulus and its response, every piece of information in our decision, there is a space. It is a brief space, to be sure, but one with a room enough to exert philosophy. Will we use it? Use it to think, use it to examine, use it to wait for more information? Or will we give into first impressions or to harmful instincts and old patterns? To pause is everything. The one before jumping to conclusions, prejudging, assuming the worst. Rushing to solve your children's problems for them or to put them back to sleep, forcing a problem into some kind of box, assigning blame, taking offense, turning away in fear. As we've discussed, there is a higher self and a lower self. This aligns with 2 types of mental processing we do, which psychologists call thinking fast and thinking slow. Fast is often the lower self. Gut instinct is the lower self. The Theodore Roosevelt's hesitation to invite Booker T. Washington to the White House because of the political consequences. Slow is the higher self. Slow is the rational, philosophical, principled self. Really thinking about things, really thinking about who you want to be, understanding upon reflection, as Roosevelt did, that such hesitation needed to be overridden. We pause, we gather ourselves, we put it up in the light. We ask, is this true? Is it actually as upsetting as it feels? As scary or as annoying as I first thought? Don't let fear or anxiety or prejudice decide. Don't let your temper decide. Let your temperament take over. Or rather, let the temperament you're striving to have, that you know your position demands you have, do its work. A leader can't make decisions on impulse. They must lead from somewhere more rational, more controlled than that. That's not to say they won't ever be tempted, that they won't have impulses. It's that they are disciplined enough not to act on them, not until they've been put up to the test, put under or in front of the light. Whether we're talking about a post on social media or a costly mistake at work, An obvious lie someone tried to deceive us with. An subordinate employee, a difficult obstacle, a casual insensitivity, or a complex problem. Everything must be met with a measured and mellow eye. Life is going to throw so much at you as it did to Washington, to Franklin, to Roosevelt, to every parent and person who ever lived. The question is, how are you going to look at all this? How in control are you of the light under which you must examine the events of life? Because the answer determines what you'll be able to do, and more important, who you will be. Damn. 30 minutes was up. See you guys day 21.